To stop my hands from flailing around, I have handcuffed them underneath the table. The hand tracking attempt was awful, and the spaghetti arms, as I got passionate, just looked like nightmare fuel. I really don't like miracle dice. I think it's a very bad mechanic, and I think there is a better way that still fits with the Battle Sisters lore, their way of playing on the tabletop, and is a lot easier to understand. I have tagged a known sister player to see what he thinks in case he wants to say something along the lines of, "Yep, sounds good, I agree," or "What about this?" If they choose to respond, if they choose not to, no problem. I also hate the habit that comes up every few games of you and your opponent accidentally picking up the miracle dice and rolling them, and then stopping and trying to remember what it was before you rolled all those miracle dice as regular dice. The only near foolproof solution to that is to write down the numbers on a piece of paper and then cross it off when it's used, but that's a pain to track. The Acts of Faith rule is very long. It is an A4 page. Now compare that to the much simpler 3 lines that you get as a Space Marine player for your faction ability. That is so much simpler to understand. It's not open to large amounts of interpretation. You don't need to have a degree in comprehension in order to try and understand it. And there were comments on the video I did about the Battle Sisters, the very long one that was an hour long, where I was there live talking people through it because I knew there was going to be a lot of questions about how miracle dice work. Is that how it's meant to be? What is it like? And I just have a way to make everything better. There's a lot of interpretation goes into it. You can change dice before you make a dice roll. This is called an act of faith. Okay, if you have 1 or more dice and it's specifying that you can be using more dice here, or so it seems, then you perform an act of faith, which it then doesn't specifically clarify what an act of faith is, it just goes on with the sentence. Now we're selecting 1 of the dice from the miracle pool to substitute that dice roll, specifying that if it is something that uses more than 1 dice, such as charge rolls or battle shock tests, you only use a single dice. Now, if we're only ever using a single dice, why do we need to clarify that? Doesn't that mean that you can use more than 1 dice for other things? It even says there, once all miracle dice substitutions have been made. Now, I'm thinking this is all about the Triumph of Saint Katherine, which gives you the ability to use more than 1 miracle dice, but it's just confusing when you read this by itself without having the knowledge of what the Triumph of Saint Katherine does, especially if you don't have the model, so you're not going to read that rule, which is, in essence, an addendum to this rule, a variation of it. So, looking at this, once all miracle dice substitutions have been made, so can we surely use more than 1 miracle dice? Like, if it's a hit roll, could I use it on a multi-melter, since both shots are rolled together, because it's the same weapon, could I be using both dice? That would explain the once all miracle dice have been substituted. Sure, I couldn't then do it in the wound roll as well as the hit roll. I get that, but why is this line here? Is it just to cover Saint Katherine? Because every time I reread it, I can see a different interpretation of this rule. If you can only use 1 dice per miracle action, then why are you being super specific about the charge rolls and the battle shock test only being able to use 1 dice? I can't just rely on figuring out how it works from Games Workshop battle reports. They miss things all the time. When they did their Battle Sister battle report against Chaos, they never rolled the invulnerable saves for the Repentia. They were like, oh, no save for them, only feel no pain. And I'm checking the rules of it. Repentia have a 6+ invulnerable save. Even in the combat patrol, Repentia have a 6+ invulnerable save. They're not rolling it. And I would really like just a Games Workshop article that says, here's Miracle Dice. It is exactly like 9th edition, except you can't use 2 dice for a charge roll or a battle shock test, and you can do it once per unit per phase instead of once per phase, with the then exception of using simulacrums, because that's what simulacrums did in 9th edition. Another annoying, confusing part of it since they've now changed. I only went with the, it's like 9th edition, but more than once per phase, as long as it isn't the same unit doing it multiple times, 5 minutes before uploading my sister's hour-long video. So, if you look really closely at my mouth moves at some points, no words come out. In fact, let's do that. Let's watch the lip sync. Okay, enough of that. So that, right now, is why I didn't particularly want to play Battle Sisters. I might do it wrong, and either do my opponent wrong, very bad, or do myself out of power that I should have had. So instead, I've been mostly playing Genestealer Occult and Space Marines. Let's compare the rule to the Eldar Fate Dice, which is why I'm sure that sisters could indeed use multiple dice on a hit roll, because on this Eldar very similar rule, it does specify that you can only use one. Now, why would two so very similar army rules be so different? Why have two rules that are similar in the first place? The Eldar version, as it stands here, is obviously much better. So much better. A better version of the same rule. They start with 12 dice, and if the rolls are bad, they can drop one to re-roll them all. That is 11 pretty good dice. Battle Sisters get them slowly. Once per player turn for a total of 10 over the course of the battle, so we get less and it takes longer to get them. You may say, aha! Well, Battle Sister squads can generate more, and dying gives us more. Well, Guardian squads can also generate additional fate dice, and can use them whether they're winning or losing the game. Battle Sisters have to start losing the game, losing units, before we get more dice. Regardless of battle size, Eldar get 12, even at the Combat Patrol level. Whereas Battle Sisters at Combat Patrol, you're looking at an extra 5, assuming like all but one of your units die. And the Eldar have more flexibility. They can use it more than once per unit per phase. It is just before making a roll that they can use a fate dice to hit, wound, and have high damage on the same shot. Sisters can't. And because Eldar can use fate dice on a charge roll, then there's no specification about not being able to use 2 dice for that roll. So can they do that? I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't specify that in the fate dice rule, so interpretations in the comments are appreciated. I don't hate Eldar. I just want army rules to be balanced if they're going to be basically identical. And I'm going to show you how to kill the Eldar and win against them in 10th edition. But that isn't just out of malice. The Battle Sisters have had things other than miracle dice in the past. Each unit was able to do something very specific much better. There was Light of the Emperor just for Battle Sister squads. The Celestians, the ones with guns, because the combat ones didn't exist at the time, could fight better and got increased strength. There were things like that for each unit. At the start of 8th edition, for the indexes, you could have an extra round of shooting or better advancing. It didn't scale well with the size of the game, but it was a very nice ability that wasn't miracle dice that took all of this tracking and long rules reading. So, this is my suggestion. Battle Sisters can pull miracles in the most unbelievable circumstances. They march faster than should be possible, hit with the most unlikely shot, and endure what should have been a killing blow. That is the background fluff. So, once per unit, per phase, you can improve 1 die by +1. This caps at 6 and counts as a modified dice. You can do it on battle shock tests, advanced rolls, hit rolls, wound rolls, damage rolls, and save rolls. Is that simple enough to understand? Now, I would have said, oh, you can improve the d6 to a 7, so you could advance 7 inches. Then you are, marching faster than should be humanly possible. But then it got a bit confusing for things like d3 damage. Could you then change that 6 to a 7? Is that 4 damage if it's a natural 6? I thought it was a bit too confusing, so I dropped that and left it at maximum 6. I left it as a modified dice. This is very much a modified dice, because counting as unmodified would mean that 1s would be impossible to fail, and I didn't want it to be cruel and say, oh yes, you got a 2+ save, but I know you're going to pass at least one of them automatically. And it also means that then 5s modified to 6s don't trigger things like devastating wounds, which we know we're having problems with at the moment, where dice are being substituted to get the devastating wounds and you're doing mortal wounds. It's just an Eldar thing, really, that mainly people are seeing it, but also on Space Marines. I didn't include places you can use the +1 with charge rolls, because then all of the sisters would get an average charge of 8 inches when coming from deep strike. I would save something like that for an optional detachment rule. It also avoids a feel bad for opponent of having a miracle dice of a 6 waiting there to pass an invulnerable save or do massive damage. It also means we don't need to encourage the Battle Sisters to die or to organize your army around these units will go and die and generate miracle dice. These units will then use the miracle dice. So you don't need to die or customize your army just to make the army rule work. More importantly, it is much simpler and matches the background of all sister orders, not just our martyred lady. I've put it as a suggestion in an email to Games Workshop to see if they prefer it. They listened to me when I requested Plastic Sisters, and when I asked for a Palatine and Combat Celestians, suddenly they were rolled out. Maybe they will listen to me again, but I kind of doubt it, since so many of these data cards are focused around the use of miracle dice. But they may take it into consideration for the codex in 1+ years' time. I will also complain about Celestians being removed in my email, and request drop cathedrals. If there is anything else you would like me to request, let me know in the comments. Oh, this is why you shouldn't tie yourself up when you're alone. I'll get the keys, I need to get my boots off, then I can pick it up with my toes and move them to my mouth while you watch this video on how to play Battle Sisters. I'll sort this. Oh, right, I can just turn into bats.